All right. So today, this week, we're gonna be expanding upon last week's a bit of last week. So we're gonna be we're gonna be like diving deep into strings and lists. So we covered a bit of strings and we covered a bit of lists last week in the introduction to Python portion. So we're gonna be expanding upon that because there's a lot that you can do with strings and lists, and we're gonna be introducing something new, something called dictionaries. So yeah, if you guys like my jokes, they're kind of cheesy. What does a Python say? Print s times 10. Feel free to laugh. Feel free to also hate me for all these awful jokes. So moving forward and onto this lesson, strings. So we're gonna be starting off with you know strings, I guess. Now for those of you who actually attempted my questions that um I gave you guys last week, you may have been stuck trying to get input on the same line. So like let's say we were given like an input like where there you get three numbers, all right? You might have gotten stuck trying to actually get the three numbers if they're all separated by spaces. You might have tried to find a solution online to split the strings by the spaces or in Google the answer. And for those who actually didn't try a single question, shame on you, of course. Uh, I'm joking, but you'll now know how to solve the questions without struggling. So this is where a really nice method called split comes in. So let me open up idle. So idle. So this is where this like fancy method comes in called dot split comes in. You can easily split up a string into their individual words just by specifying what to split by. So by default, if you leave dot split blank, it will just split by spaces. However, if you specify anything else, it will split by that parameter. The output will be a list of the split string. So let's say in this case it would be like splitting a name by spaces dot split. It splits us into splitting a string by spaces. And then we with a comma separated by comma, so split comma by comma commas. You do dot split. It creates a list with everything split by commas. And if you have splitting word by word, string word, you do dot split word. It separates them into so splitting by string, and then there's an extra word here, so it creates like this. It takes this empty bit after and gets that and and splits it up. So let me bring up another example. So let's say we have CS club here at Massey, and we do dot split. It breaks up everything by VMCS club here at Massey. All right. And if you have anything else, so let's say we have comma VMCS comma club comma here comma at comma Massey comma, and we do dot split, and then let's say we specify we want to split by commas. It'll take this text string before it, and which is nothing here. It just leaves us with an empty space. Then it takes VMCS. Splits this by comma, so we get club here, comma here, comma at, comma Massey, and then there's there's a comma here, and then there's like an empty space where there's nothing right after, so it just gives us it's like an empty string. Does anyone have questions about that? Let me just look at the chat. I guess no one has questions about it. As far as
Yeah, I have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
So, so now that you have that value, how can you pull like values out of that answer or
So
your response?
so let's say like okay, we can just use this like this is a list, right? Let me just whoops, I accidentally resized it. This is just a list, right? Um, right? Like it just outputs lists.
Yeah.
So what you can do is you can still index it normally, like a normal list. So let's say we want like the very third the third value of this, right? So it gets us this third value just by using a normal. This is still a list, so you can still index it with this index operator. So does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. Any other questions? Uh, don't feel shy. You can always feel free to turn on your mics and interrupt me if you have a question. Or you can feel free to post in chat. There are no there are no bad questions. So just feel free to say them out loud. All right. Moving on. Now you can also count the number of times a string occurs within another string, using a method dot count. Uh, so it only counts if it exactly matches the string you specified. So if you include anything extra that doesn't exist in the string, it won't count it. So let's say back in like here it says 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. If you count sheep, can you put input strings into a list? Um, yes, you can put input strings into a list. Um, so uh, I'm guessing like you want like multiple input values into like a string, into like a list, right? Like let's say you have like 3 lines and you want to put them into a list. Yeah, you can do that. That's completely allowed in Python. We'll get to that in a bit. That's one of the things we'll cover in lists. So you can still do like the for loop, like make like a empty list, and you do like a for loop. However, we'll cover a bit more about that in the lists portion of our lesson. So just hold on tight about that. If you have questions about like the list part, we'll cover that in the list portion of this lesson. So going back to what I was saying, you can also count the number of times like you can count the number of times a string occurs. So here it says like 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. If you do dot count sheep, it shows the sheep shows up 3 times. So it outputs 3. And then you see how many words is in this wordy word sentence. If you count the number of times word shows up, it shows up 3 times. Since it counts it like exactly, so this part is like counts as a word. So it counts like even though it has like the s after, it counts it as word. So that's counted as an exact that's counted as 1. And then here wordy, it doesn't care about the y after. It just matches that, hey, this exists. So it adds 1 to that count. And then there's word here, which is it matches exactly to word. So it adds 1. So there's 3. It occurs 3 times. Now if we had a space right after, it goes and checks, hey, how many times does this match within this string? So this doesn't match because what comes after is an S, and that doesn't match word space. This just says word and followed by an S. Then here with wordy, that doesn't match as well since it just says word, and then the Y after it doesn't match the space here. And then here word space here matches with word space here, so there's only 1 that exists in here. And then if I just put a random string, so let's say not in here, how many times does that show up? It doesn't show up at all. So let's say we have like a VMCS club here at Massey, and we want to see the number of spaces in here. You can just do count and then enter the what you want counted. And if you hit enter, it counts there are 4 spaces exactly in this. All right. Does that make sense to you guys? Does anyone have questions about it? Doesn't look like there's any questions. All right, moving on. Now going back to the previous week's lesson, someone asked if they were able to find the position of a specific character or string in Python. There's actually a method for that, and it's called .find. You can specify what to search for, and it'll return like the index, which is the position of the first occurrence of that string. So optionally, if you specify integer after specifying the string, so .find you specify a string. If you specify an integer after, it will return the first occurrence that comes right after. So let's say in here like VMCS club, C shows up twice. So if I specify a number, let's say, so this is 0, 1, 2. If I specify 3, it will find the next occurrence after the third after the third index, on or after. If you specify 2 integers, the second integer will indicate what up to where up to you should stop searching. So like if I say I stop searching like right before this, I can specify to stop searching right before this letter. So it only specify like it can only search like here for a C, for the next index of a C. And if no index is found, it will just return -1, saying that there's no index available. Looks like there's a question. All right. It's just I've been posting something in the chat. Um, so going back to the example here. All right. Um, here like vmcs.club. So let's say we like do vmcs.club.find c. It finds the first occurrence in which it shows up in the second index. Since 0, 1, 2, we start counting from 0. So it finds the first C, the position of the first C, which is in the second position. Now, okay, moving on. Next, so let's say we want to find the next. Let's say we specify 2 here, okay? Find C, and then we specify 2 here. It still outputs 2 since it's at this. We're trying to start searching at 2, so it includes itself, and then anything after it will be searched as well. But the first occurrence is already at the position that I specified, so it just outputs the next occurrence, which is 2, which is still 2. All right, and then VMCS club, and then let's say we start dot find C, and then we find the next available one, which should be 3, should occur after on or after the third index, in which it will output 5, since that's when this is where next C shows up. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and the next C shows up at the 5th index. And then now if we specify, let's say 6, so VMCS club dot find the C 6. It outputs -1 since there's no C that comes after this second C. So it looks like there are no more C's left. So it will just output -1 since there's no available index. Now, if let's say we narrow the search down, so let's say we do dot find C, and it has to be between 3 and 5. Then it will just output -1 since it goes up to but doesn't include the 5th index. So it starts at the 3rd index and it goes up to the 5th, but not including the 5th index. So it'll start. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2. So it'll start searching at S, and it'll go up to 4. It'll go to 4, but then it goes up to but doesn't include 5. So it will only search this bit, the S in the space. All right, and then let's say we find VMCS club dot find, and we search for VMCS exactly. It gets us 0 since it starts that's where it matches, which is the 0th index. All right. Does anyone have any questions about that? Guessing not. So you can also go in and replace words based on a string. So this is where dot replace comes in. Will need to specify what you want replaced and what you want it replaced with. And then optionally, you can include an integer after those 2 parameters, and it will limit the number of times it will replace items in your string. So let's say we want to replace VMCS club with masseycs. So VMCS club, and we want to replace it with we want to replace VMCS with masseycs. All right, and we put enter. It replaces VMCS here with masseycs, and now it says masseycs club. Now if we have VMCS 3 times, and we do dot replace, and we want to replace VMCS with massey, it will replace VMCS here with massey all times it shows up. All right. And then with after that, okay, so it shows VMCS, 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 and then I still specify the same parameter, so VMCS gets replaced with massey. And let's say we specify with only 2 times, then it will only replace it 2 times, and then after the second time, it won't replace anymore. So let's do VMCS, VMCS, VMCS. That replace, and we replace VMCS. And let's say massey. Whoops, that I accidentally clicked enter before submitting. But VMCS, VMCS, VMCS. That replace VMCS, massey. And let's say we only want to replace it 2 times. So replace the first 2 occurrences with massey, and after the second occurrence, then every other occurrence will just not be replaced at all. All right. Um, does anyone have questions about that? I'm guessing no one has questions about that. All right. Now sometimes you might get an input that's completely covered in spaces at the beginning and the end. This is where this nice method called dot strip comes in. You can use this to clean up, quote unquote, clean up your input by removing any trailing white spaces or any leading white spaces. So a trailing white space is anything that comes after, and leading is anything that comes before. So just trailing. So it will just remove all the trailing leading white spaces. You can also specify other characters to remove from the beginning and end, and it will just not touch anything between. So once it finds something that doesn't match what you specified, then it will just not completely ignore it until it reaches the end. In which if it finds something that does match and the remaining characters at the end do match, it will just remove all those characters. All right, so let's say, here in this example, let's say we have like a bunch of spaces, VMCS club, and then a bunch of spaces after, and we do dot strip. So by default, if you do dot strip with nothing in between, it will just by default just remove any white space before and after. So it just cleans it up and says VMCS club. But let's say we have like a bunch of space between VMCS and club, and then we end it. We cover it with spaces at the end, and we just do dot strip. It will still leave the spaces in between. It's just anything that comes after will be removed. And then let's say we can also specify some like words in there. So let's say we put words. It can be in any, just as long as it's contains the same letters. It can be in any order, doesn't matter, as long as just it matches in any sense. It will be removed. So let's say we just have a bunch of S's, and then we put VMCS club, and then put a bunch of S's, maybe some O's, R's, W's, and D's. If we do dot strip, and if we put words, it will remove all the words, everything that matches before and after VMCS club. All right. Does that make sense to you guys? Does anyone have any questions? That's all the fancy, nice methods that we're going to be featuring for strings. Does anyone does anyone have questions about that? No one's typing in junior. Is anyone typing in junior help? No one seems to be typing in junior help, so I'm guessing that is no one has questions. Now moving on. Okay, so let's say you actually went, moving on to the list. Let's say you actually tried to do some of the questions, like the good student you are, and you found out about dot split. Now, in some of the questions, you already know the number of inputs you get in a single line. Such as an example of the question A plus B, where you knew in each line you would have A and it'd have B. Now, if we use dot split, you can use the index operator to get the first number and the second number separately. However, within Python, you can use something called unpacking the list. You can assign multiple variables to each index of the string. Index of the list, that should be index of the list. Index of the list. Now you must specify the same number of variables as the numbers of elements in the list, and each variable will correspond to the value in the list in the same order you specify. So if you don't specify the same number of variables as elements, you will encounter an error. That might be a lot to unpack in one paragraph, but I'll just demonstrate to you. So let's say we have in this example, let's say we have a list with three values, so X, Y, and Z. You can assign, and it has 1, 10, and 2. All right. So if we do this, X will be assigned to 1, Y will become 10, and Z will become 2. So that's how what will go on with unpacking lists. And now you have to have exactly 3 variables matching the same number of, you must have the same number of variables matching the same number of elements in this list. And if we get the value of X, it's 1. If you get the value of Y, it becomes 10. And if you get the value of Z, it gets 2. Now, if we don't have the same number of values, let's say we have x and y, and we match it to 1, 10, and 2 again, it will throw us an error saying that there are too many values to unpack. Since there's two variables here, and it's trying to unpack a list of three numbers. All right, and then the same thing if we only have two number values and we have 1 and 10, if we do x, it still gets us 1, y gets us 10. That's probably not the best example since it was the same values from before. So let's say we have 10 and 200, 2000, and we have x, it gives us 10, and y it gives us 2000. So yeah, so that's what unpacking a list is. And you can use that with dot strip since the dot split. So like, let's say we get like an input and it has like, we have an input with like, let's say it has a, you know, A and B. Let's say, and you want to assign it to two variables A and B. So let's say we have A and B. You can still assign it to like a list with A and B in it. And then we call A, it gets outputs A, and B, it outputs B. Someone has a question. No, it's just Evan typing in the chat. Never mind. Now if you do something like this, don't believe that these variables are connected in any way to the list anymore. They just more or less copy the values to the variable, and if you modify the variable, the original list never changes, and if you modify the list, the original variable never changes. Moving on, you can also add items to a list. There are two ways of doing this. One is using the method .append to a list. I should probably put brackets after. You can use this on a pre-existing list, and it will add the item you specified to the list at the end. Note that it doesn't return anything, so you would need to use this on a variable with a list to actually have any use of it. Another method is using a plus sign. Essentially, you can combine two lists together, like with string concatenation. This doesn't automatically update a variable, however, so you would need to reassign your variable with the updated merged list. So let's say we have like a list. So let's say we have this list here. So marks equals 90, 98, 97, 80, and 70. All right. And if we do marks, so this is just what's in this list. All right. If we let's say we want to add someone gets 100, okay, and we want to add 100 to this list, you just do marks dot append 100, and it returns nothing. But then if we call marks again, it added 100 to the end of this list. Now you can only specify one value at a time with .append. If you try to specify any more values, so let's say we have 20 and 300, it will throw us an error saying that it can only it takes exactly one argument, but I specified two. So you can only specify one exact argument within .append. Now going back to the plus example, so let's say we want to add like a list full of additional marks. And what you can do is just take your list and add, let's say we want to add 300, someone gets a 300% on a test. Let's say someone gets like an 85 on a test, and let's say someone gets a 20 on a test. All right, and if we output marks, it will add this list to the end of our pre-existing list, and we just add it together. Now, if we just do marks plus like 50, it adds it to the you haven't reassigned it. This is just what it returns. And if we call marks again, 50 doesn't exist anymore since we never reassigned marks. All right.
Yeah, Gordon.
Yes.
Can you use all of these in like a like a module, like when you're coding?
What do you mean?
Like
I'm
if
not
you
sure.
make a new file.
Oh, when you make a new file? Oh yeah, you can do this in a file. I'm just showing all these examples in Shell. However, the same you can still do this in a normal file. Just don't you just can't like just output like print something like this with typing it out. That this only works in a shell. I'm just using the shell as an example so that I can easily, I don't have to quickly save and run. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
All right. So note that like you can so going back to her, you can only append only one out. That append can only add one value at a time, or else it'll just give you this error. But so if you can add to a list, that means you should be able to remove from a list. And Surprise, surprise, you can't. There are many methods you can use to remove a list, and they do different things as well. So first, let's start off with this keyword del. Although it's not exclusive to a list, it's pretty useful for removing items from a list. Um, you can even use it to delete variables themselves, but for the case of lists, you can use it to delete indexes of a list. So let's say we go back to this marks, all right? This marks list here. And let's say we want to remove this 300, all right? So where's this position, where is this 300 in this list? So let's start counting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. And what you can do is just call del marks at 6 and we call marks again, and it shows that it deletes this from the list. And now you can also call the index operator and delete like portions of the list. And so let's say we want to delete the last 3 items, all right? And you can call like the index operator again, and press enter. And if we call marks again, I deleted the last 3 items of this list. And let's say we just want to delete this whole list in general. We don't want this list anymore. We call delete marks, and if we call marks again, it will output an error saying that marks doesn't exist since I deleted marks here. So that's what the keyword del does. It pretty much deletes items, I guess. So you can delete variables themselves with the example here with deleting the whole list itself. However, you can also use it to just delete individual indexes of from a list, or even multiple indexes with the index operator. Now, does anyone have questions about that before we move on? I'm guessing not. All right. Now the del keyword can seem a bit scary, and the wrong usage could end up deleting your whole variable. So instead, we can use something called .pop. With .pop, you can only remove one index at a time. And with the index you specify, of course. However, it will return what you removed. So if you leave the parameter of .pop blank, it will just remove the last value in your list. So let's say we go back to let me just copy this marks example here, and we paste it in. Let's say we just want to remove the last item from the list. We call marks.pop, and it will return the last value from the. It will remove the last value from the list. And if we call marks again, the 300 doesn't exist anymore, and because I removed it from the list. Now let's say we want to remove the first value here. I can do marks.pop, and we call the index. So let's say we want to remove the very first value. It returns 90, and we call marks again. Will show the list again, but since I already removed the 90, 90 doesn't show up anymore. All right. Does anyone have any questions about that? I'm guessing not. Okay, and lastly, let's say you don't know the index of a certain value in your list. You could just find the index, then use delete or the del or .pop. However, we programmers like to be efficient. That's just code word for lazy half the time. So we have a method that has that built in. It's .remove, and you can specify what value you want removed. Now, it's not like .replace in strings where it will go and remove every single occurrence from the list. Rather, it will only remove the very first occurrence of that value. If that value doesn't exist, it will just throw an error. Does someone have a question? No, that's still Evan talking in the chat. So let's say we go back to the marks value, all right? Let's say we call marks again. This is all the values in marks, all right? And let's say we do marks.remove 100. So it removes the very first occurrence of the 100. So it removes this 100 here and leaves everything else, leaves this 100 here, since it only removes the very first occurrence of the value you specify. Now, let's say we want to remove 0 from this list, all right? And we say marks.remove 0. It throws an error since 0 does not exist on this list. And we do marks remove 100 again. It removes the next 100 in our list. And if we do marks remove 100 again, It throws an error since there are no more hundreds on this list. And then let's say you don't want everything in your list anymore. You can always call .clear, which just clears your whole list. So let's say we do marks.clear, and we call marks. The list is cleared. The list is now empty now. All right. Does anyone have questions about that? I'm guessing not. All right, and then okay, you can also go in and change values within the list just by calling the index operator and assigning a value directly into that list. So let's say we have this marks list again, and let's say we want to update the very first value to 91. And we call marks again. The very first value becomes 91 since I reassigned it. And we can just do the normal, you can still do like minus equals, divide equals, times equals. So let's say we do plus equals 2, marks at marks. It will get you, it will show that, this value has been added to with plus equals. All right. Um, So that was a lot to go through about, updating a list, adding to a list and removing from a list, and clearing a list and updating values in a list. Does anyone have questions about that? Modifying a list. Guessing no one has questions since no one's unmuting or no one's typing in the chat. All right. Um, now that we're done adding and removing from our list, we should actually know how to find items in our list, since I never actually specify how to find items in the list, and that's pretty important. It's similar to the strings, in a way, but this method is similar to the strings. It's called .index. Whoa. Now you may be wondering, Gordon, index and find aren't the same word, already similar. And you're absolutely correct. Index and find are indeed not the same word. But they're similar in the sense that the parameters that you specify, in dot index is exact this it's similar to the dot find method in with strings. So with dot index, you're required to put one parameter, which is the item you're searching for, and the two other parameters are the index to start searching, as well as where to go up till to stop searching. So it's similar to dot find, and also like dot find, it will find the very first occurrence that shows up. But unlike dot find, if there isn't a value in the list that matches what you specified, it will just throw an error. So let's say we get this marks value again, and we do marks.index 100. It gets us the very first index of 100, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. Now let's say we want to find the very next index of 100, but after 5. So let's say starting at 6. The next value is 7 since this is the 7th index. And now let's say we want to start searching 100, 6, and we want to go up to but not including 7. It'll throw an error since, anything between 6 up to 7, up to but not including 7, there's no 100 here, so it just threw an error here. Now you can also feel free to, reverse your entire list if you don't like the way your list is arranged. So there are two ways of doing this. So one way is using the method with list dot reverse, in which the list you specify will reverse with no return value. So it just modifies the list, the variable like you're working with, and it will just reverse it without returning anything at all. So you don't use the equal signs to reassign your list. But another way that does return a value, but doesn't modify the original list is reverse. This function reverse. You'll need to specify the list you want reversed and reversed. However, if you use reversed, it'll return something weird called an iterator. And what you want to do to convert this thing called an iterator back into a list is to throw this reverse function into a list function, and it will just return back to a list you want to use. So let's say we have this list again, all right? This marks list again. And then we do marks.reverse. If we call marks, the marks will actually be reversed since, we called reverse here. Now, if we do reversed list marks, it returns something here called list reverse iterator object at yada yada yada. This is a memory address. This is something you can't really use at all. So what you want to do is you want to make this back into a list that you can use. So what you want to do is you put this list function, and in here we put reversed, and inside reverse you put marks. You put the list you want to reverse, get reversed again, and then you close it, and it shows us this marks list that's been reversed. And we show marks again. Marks hasn't been changed since this is a return value. It doesn't modify the original list. So this is how you reverse the two ways you can reverse a list within Python. Does anyone have any questions about that? No, I'm guessing not. All right, and then now finally, let's say, let's say you wanna, you wanna find all the marks in increasing order. All right. Let's say you want to see who's the lowest mark in the class and who has the highest mark in the class, or you want to just sort, like, let's say, people's age or whatever within the list. There's a method to do that, and it's called dot sort, which modifies your original list to sort in ascending order. So it doesn't return anything, but it sorts your list in ascending order. So let's say we do marks dot sort. We return marks. It shows here all the marks that have in the ascending order. So it starts with 70, 75, 80, 90, 97, 98, 100, 100, 200, 300. All right. Now dot sort by default only sorts in ascending order. Now, if you want it in descending order, I'm guessing most people would try doing dot sort, then do dot reverse to reverse it, and it will still give it ascending order, but there's a better way of doing it. You can specify inside dot sort reverse equals true, and it will sort in descending order. So let's say we get this jumbled list again. All right, and if we do dot marks dot sort reverse equals true, and we call marks, it sorts in now descending order, and now you're able to sort it in descending order. Does anyone have questions about that?
Can you sort it so that it sorts like in to give you like the median automatically instead of like have you having to do it?
Getting the median, like, I'm not sure what you mean, like getting the median.
Never mind. I just answered random question.
Oh no, like getting the median, you just sort it and you find the length of it, and then you know you find the middle, I guess. Just divide by 2 with math, I guess. That's how you do it with the median. Now the last thing I want to cover that's important to list is something called list comprehension, and this is one of the most important ideas in Python. As you can easily shrink down like a few for loops and if statements for a list into a single simple line. So let's say for example, you want to create a list from 0 up to but not including 10. And most people, what they do is do something like this. So let's create a new file. Let's say we have new list, and we create a new list, and we do for I in range 10, and new list dot append I. I'm guessing this is what most people will do. And then let's say we save this. So let's say we'll go back to desktop, and let's say we want to call it so cs.py. All right, and let's say we run. It didn't really open anything. And let's say we print new list again. All right, and we run. It creates this list, and this is a totally valid method. However, there are 2 issues with this. One, it's kind of hard to read since it's a bit scattered everywhere. And 2, dot append is a very slow method in Python, and it uses a lot of memory. Two things we have to consider when doing competitive programming: we want to save time and we want to save memory, since we are restricted on both of those things in competitive programming. And what we can do instead is we can shrink down this for loop into this list here. And what we can do here is we can, instead of doing for I in range 10 new list dot append I, what we can do is I for I in range 10. All right, and if we run, it creates this list. Whoa. It does, this does exactly the same as the code before. However, it is much cleaner, faster, and uses less memory. This is also important, very important during competitive programming when you are given a single line input with multiple values, and you want to convert all these values to an integer. So let's say we want to, let's say we're given multiple values, all right, and you want to easily, convert them into a list full of integers, all right. What most people will do, I'm guessing, is you get like a user input, and you get input dot split, and in order to split this input into by the white spaces, and we store it all in like this list called nums, and then we go in for I in user input, we do nums dot append user input at I int I, right, and we print print nums here. And if we run this, let's say we were given the values, 10, 20, 30, 40, 1. This does the job. However, it's a bit slow, and it's a bit, you have to create like a whole new list to store it. Instead, what you can do is, you can cut out this loop, and we can cut out creating the new list. What you can do is you can just simply just go to nums and into this list. We can call int I, and then for I in input dot split. If we run this, let's say we go back to 10, 20, 10, 20, 30, 40, 1. It will create this list again, exactly the same. And essentially, we can break down this like massive expression, this expression, I guess, like this list comprehension expression, into two parts: the expression itself and the loop. So here, this is the expression that goes on, that's being added to this. This is what's being added to the list. Generally, it's the list, it's the items we're sorting through from the loop, and the loop is how many times this expression gets added. So here, this is the loop, and this is the expression. So it pretty much goes through this for loop. Okay, it starts off with this list here. So input.split creates like a list, because this is a string here. This is the input you're inputting, and it splits this string here up into by spaces into this list that's separated by spaces. All right, and now each of these values is going gets int access as I. So it goes through, and the first value is I, and then it iterates to the next part of the loop, which is the first value in this list, and that becomes I, and then so on and so forth, or like how we did loops before. And what here in this expression, it adds, converts it to an integer and adds it to the list. So let's say we don't do I here. Let's say we just put hello world. All right. Now, if we run this, and let's say we give like a bunch of random things to add, it adds hello world 1, 2, 3, 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Since there are 4 things in this list, and it adds it 4 times. All right. So this is pretty much what gets added to the list, and you can access this I here from this from the expression. So we have int I. If we have I here, it won't be converted into an integer. So let's say we have 10, 20, 30, 41. This is still a string, since we haven't added in the integer. We haven't converted this to an integer to add it into the list. It remains as a string. All right. And then finally, at the end, after the for loop, you can add a condition after the loop, in which it will only add the expression if this condition is true. So let's say we only want inputs that are greater than 5. So let's say we have int I, and then we say if I is greater than 5, if we run this, so let's say we have 10, 20, 30, 41. Oh, whoops! I didn't do that right. Int I. Let me just fix this. Int I. If we run this again, we have 10, 20. Oh, let me hide my taskbar. 20, 30, 41. It only adds values that are greater than 5, since this only triggers when this condition is true. So when the condition I is greater than 5, it only adds this expression when this condition is true. All right, so that might be a lot to take in regards to list comprehension. Does anyone have questions about that?
Why do you need the int I at the start? Why can't you just put for I in input?
For I and input, now this is pretty much what gets added to the expression. This is you have to specify what you want to add into this list. You can add anything you want. So Python pretty much gives you options in order for you to add whatever you want using list comprehension. So if you said nothing, it wouldn't add anything to this list. It would actually just give it an input. Let's say we just put like going back to the example earlier, like with hello. Um, if we go back and run, so let's say we do 10, 20, 30, 40, 10, it adds hello 5 times, since that's what we're specifying to add into this list. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So if we specify I, it adds this, like, since input dot split is the input is a string. If we split, it still gives us a string. If we just specify I, it will only add strings into this list. So if we want, all these values converted into an integer, we would still have to specify int I, and it converts every value in this loop into an integer and adds it to the list. Do you understand why I also did int I here? What is that?
Yeah, or because if you didn't do int I, it would just print a bunch of strings, I think.
Yeah, it would just put a bunch of strings into the list. So int I converts it all into integers. Does anyone else have any questions about that? There are no bad questions. Feel free to ask any questions at all. No questions. Um, all right. And then the last thing, this is pretty simple. You got through all of that list stuff. We'll get to this new thing called dictionaries. And sometimes you want to store data, but rather than accessing the data using like indices, with lists, so like you use numbers, you can use something called dictionaries. Now dictionaries will store values based on something called a key, where you can access it with any immutable, so anything that can't be changed, data type. Similar to how in real life a dictionary gets the definition based on a word, a dictionary in Python will get a value based on a key you provided. So to get started, with a dictionary, you create a dictionary using curly brackets, then specify the key with the respective value with key and value separated by commas. So like, let's say we have in this example here, dictionary equals curly brackets, Python, uh, a good programming language, and you have to separate by commas, JavaScript, another good programming language, and then C++, uh, also another good programming language. And if we end it with the curly brackets, it creates this dictionary. All right. Now you can also surround it using the function dict. We just dismiss this. Where inside you can specify each in the respect each uh, each key with the respective value. Key in the respective value with key equals value separated by commas. So instead of doing curly brackets, you can do like dictionary equals dict, Python equals a good programming language, JavaScript equals another good programming language, and C++ equals also another good programming language. Now, keep in mind. Oh, whoops. C++. Okay. C++ was really good. It should be CPP. You can't have this plus here since it just follows within the dict function here. You can't have a um, it follows the same rules with variable names. So you have to you can't start with a number. You can't have symbols, and you can only include underscores, numbers, and letters. All right. So now note that within keys and values, they aren't just restricted to strings. So you can have any values, I guess. You can have any values and any keys. Now with using dict here, if you have these keys are strings. So you you can only have keys that are strings with this function. However, if you use the curly brackets, it can be any. These can be numbers, strings, anything you can think of that can't be changed. Now accessing these values is just like accessing values in lists. However, instead of specifying an index, you specified a key instead. You can also use .get instead as well. So let's say we have this dictionary again. If we place that in, let's say we call dictionary at Python. It would output what's at the key Python here, which is a good programming language. Now if we do dictionary.get Python as well, it would do the exact same thing. And if we do the same thing with the here with the dict function, I would do dictionary at Python. It would get us a good programming language. Now if you do dictionary.get CPP, it would also say another good programming language, since it gets that value at that key. Now updating is also exactly the same as with lists. You can call the index and just assign it to a new value. And you can also add new entries into the dictionary the same way if the key doesn't already exist in the dictionary. So let's say we have dictionary with this dictionary here. Let me just copy and paste. So let's say we want to update the C++ here. So dictionary at C++. Let's say we want to update it so that it says the language the seniors are suffering with. All right. And we call dictionary at C++. It updates it with the language that the seniors are suffering with. And let's say we want to add a new entry in here. So let's say we have want to add a new entry so that has a racket. That's another programming language out there. And we say we assign it to the language the U Waterloo students are suffering with. And if we call dictionary at racket, it shows us the language the U Waterloo students are suffering with. And we call dictionary, it shows us all the values in this dictionary. And then removing from a dictionary is exactly the same as deleting by index from a list. You can use del or .pop. Clearing is the exact same with .clear as well with a dictionary. So let's say with the dictionary you want to remove this racket portion, all right? So we do .pop racket, and we call dictionary. It still returns with .pop, it still returns the value. And if we call dictionary here, it prints out this dictionary without racket since I removed it from the list. Now we do dictionary.pop again with racket. It gives us an error saying that racket doesn't exist anymore since I already deleted it. And then we do del dictionary at C++. Oh, whoops. Let me go back because I didn't complete that properly. It's dictionary at C++. If it removes it from the list. So we say call dictionary, it removes it from the list. If we call it again, it also leaves us with the same error saying that there's no key that exists. And if we do dictionary.clear, it just clears this whole dictionary. All right. Does anyone have questions about that? About dictionaries, how to access them, update, and delete them? Delete keys from a dictionary. No? I'm guessing no one has questions? All right. And then lastly, something that most people want to do is, you want to run through, some people want to run through each, you might be wondering, how do I iterate? So like go through each go through the dictionary if there are two quote-unquote values. So to go through all the keys, you can use the same method we've been doing with lists. So like for I in dictionary, if we let me create this dictionary again. I should probably do that. So with this dictionary here, let's paste this in, and let's say we do for I in dictionary. Whoops, I forgot to put the colons in this lesson plan. Let's say we do for I in dictionary colon print I. It prints through each key in this dictionary. So that's what if you just want the keys, you do the same way as with lists. And if you want to access, you can also still access each key in the respective list by doing print I, and then let's say we do add, dictionary at I guess. It shows the values if you just access them by key. But if this can be a bit cumbersome, you don't want to be accessing. Let's say you want to be only accessing all the values in a dictionary. What you can do is instead of doing for I in dictionary and printing dictionary at I, you just do for I in dictionary dot values, and then print I. It prints through all the values of dictionary. Now, something to keep in mind when using dictionaries is that keys are unique. You cannot have more than one of the same key. It wouldn't really make sense with lists if you put in one. If you could have two values of the same index. The same thing goes with dictionaries. You also can't have anything that changes become a key, such as dictionaries themselves can't be keys because dictionaries can change. As well as lists can't be keys because lists can also change. Since but dictionaries and lists can be values within a dictionary. Since Python doesn't care if you can change the values or not, and you can go ahead and feel free to change the values as you please with dictionaries and lists. However, they can't be keys, as keys cannot be changed. So some of the things that you can be accepted as keys are like strings, numbers, and booleans, etc. It's kind of like let's say like you had like your key to your house was always constantly changing. How would you feel? Let's say you only have one pair of keys, one set of keys, to your house, and every day it just kept changing on you. So that's the same idea with dictionaries here in Python. Your key can't be changed. So that's the end of our lesson for today. That's a lot to take in. If anyone has questions about that, feel free to ask now. But if no one has questions, since last week I forgot to teach you guys about dot split, you guys probably weren't able to do most of the questions I specified. So I want you guys to go back and try the questions from last week, since I'm pretty sure no one has actually done these questions. I can go check if you guys have done this question, and I'm pretty sure no one has. So here are all the questions from last week, and the new questions. If you finish all these questions, you can feel free to try these new questions. If you get to them. One of the questions I want you guys to try them, especially, is this Mr. Matsanovich. He's a teacher here at Massey. This is his list assignment that for his ICS 3U class. He's been generous enough to give it to ComSci Club for us to show. I want you guys to try it. Some of the stuff might be you might need to Google, since I will cover it's not one of the stuff we're planning on covering within CS Club, so you might have to try to find it out yourself. But I want you guys to try it, since it is a good practice for lists. All right. Does anyone have questions before we go? I'm guessing no one has any questions at all. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right. Then that is today this week's ComSci Club lesson. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'll be sticking around if anyone has any questions they want to ask me. But other than that, yeah, go enjoy your day.